Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to have this opportunity to share some of the poems from my most recent book. The book is titled Full into Ashes, and the phrase full into ashes comes from the closing verses of one of the poems in the book. The title of that poem is The House That Spoke. I'll read those last verses now, spoken from with the voice of the house as she entered life. I am bewildered by my fall, how the ground rose between groans and good lips, how it hummed when the tower homed fully into ashes, and all I heard whooshed between words was love you, love me. That's what sustains the poems in this collection. It's not an abstract concept or a disembodied idea. It's really an emotional reality. Human beings are made of flesh and bone and spirit, and the ideas we have are incarnate. They're real because of the physicality of our lives. We make them real through the physicality of our lives. As a transplanted poet, I was born in Manila and educated in Madrid, and have made my home fully in the United States for the last 25 years since I was married. And I find myself all this time returning to words that will, I wouldn't say recuperate or restore an old landscape, because I think whatever landscape that was is not possible to restore, but to create a new landscape that incorporates elements of that landscape we left behind. And you'll see that thread in the poems of the book, especially in this first one called First House, where I try to reach back through memory to that first moment. And of course, none of us can do that. But let me read the poem, and you'll see what I'm trying to say, hopefully. It's called First House. Hardly a way to find the window and the lock, the bellied casement with its green iron skin of evening. We have not mastered the equation, this remembrance and the past, the odd aroma and a jar of pickled mangoes. The tongue recovers, first the sugar, then the treetop, then the fruit. One for one, what is memory turns portent, which is good, since we're traipsing out of doors, out of kitchens, out of decks, into a clean white morning. Come, see where you were feasted in those days. The curtains slung, the sky deliciously intrusive. A blue fan whistled, a woman cried, and the body recognized what the portent whispered might be. Come, see where you were born. A mother's memory restores it. A pitcher trembled in the foyer with a garland of chrysanthemums, yellow bush around the belly, and the birds brushed on its porcelain flew home, while she lay wish-worn, childbearing, loving more, baby talk, the garland clipped, thumbs across her knuckles in a T, te quiero, te amo, words upon her sweaty wrists, the achy limbs way metaphored, futured into spring. Was it really that way? Were there chrysanthemums in the room? Probably not. I couldn't know. But the poem is real. It's real because it recreates that moment of first relationship, of mother-child relationship that we all experience. And from then, everything else, every reality, of course, is relationship. The next poem I would like to share also holds a woman as a nexus, connecting things that are sometimes apparently disparate. I think that's one of the most exciting things about poetry, is the way you try to connect things that don't seem to be related with each other. And this poem is entitled Generations. And you'll notice the figure of the woman at the heart of all these events that are coming together. So here now is Generations. It happened thus. A woman shiver under a veiled surface, translucent hand, pool of thread up and above a froth's turmoil. A woman's hour shearing off all the way along her incandescent skin, as when the moon follows its skin through cloud and starburst. It happens thus. Day breaks in the crater of her throat where marvel lasts, midnight toad through things outlasting. Day breaks like the bird that pinpoints morning or the celebrating blue that quicks the quietness. Somewhere else, a wine glass splinters in a sink, burgundy on the thumb, signet of death for the one hunted. Elsewhere, too, there's a quail under a tree, wincing back to a god's lap in a jacket of pine needles. And the woman, fully aware, doses wisely, giver, givable. Ah, both love and love-worn shiver happen still. Others leave, all the guests, all the simple, sallow faces. The veil assembles moon and lungful in a room, where light peeks over the bedposts. Stay with me, she says. Our God is waiting. The world creeps homeward on her temples. I'm especially drawn to this sense of the body carrying a whole world of reality, of ourselves as being vessels of reality. If only through the awareness that we have of the world. I think it's fascinating, the entirety of the universe, to be inside human consciousness when we are so small, such a minute part of the universe. Some time ago, my husband and I and some friends, a couple, were driving in Virginia near Charlottesville, and we came upon the gravesite of President James Madison and his wife, Dolly Madison, and it was in a state of disrepair, but it was being restored at that time. And there was this big man with very leonine hair and large hands, but who very tenderly would pick up a comb, an item that he picked out of that gravesite. And of course, this idea of being containers and vessels of life came back to me. So much so that when we say things like, oh, you return to earth, I think, well, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the earth returns to us as something that we can contain, and through that containing, making us full. So I'd like to share with you the poem that I wrote after that visit to the gravesite. It's called The Monument Restorer. Between storms, an obelisk, a man, and the oils of a late sun streaming. He toils away in the heart cavity of a field. A yard or so from her ankles, he soft brushes the dead. Lion mane, luminous head, hands bristly as paws, tease up the earth. 5 years in still company. They're everywhere, foot over flat foot, hair wisp on hair, shoe buckle and loose linen. Sheol, Sheol. Lord, how we bury, bless, commend them to oak groans and wonder. The universe owns. Could it be otherwise? We, swallowing the world, it and the withering stars, the carbon dissolution of a place so intended. Once out of the race, we, with a brush on the bricks, leveling ages. Sweethearts and weeds, the man and his broom, the obelisk, and the small room under where no one lies, sleeps, or waits. I'd swear a lost locket appears simply from loving, gold in the crook of his arm where dusk leaks. Look, full are the man and the field, full are we under the sun. I like this idea, or more than an idea, I would say this expectation of fullness. But a fullness that is not satiety. I think that's the paradoxical wonder of this thing, that our human capacity continues to grow for beauty, for goodness, for love. The more we experience, the larger it seems, and the more we can absorb. And, well, I think it makes sense that the book is titled Fully Into Ashes, and many of the poems have this sense of the fullness that I'm seeking and intuiting. So this other poem, for example, that I'd like to share is called All Souls Day, and it also has a sense of fullness. As you know, all cultures, or basically all cultures, celebrate ancestry in one way or another. And in the Philippines, on the day of All Souls Day, people visit the gravesites and the cemeteries. But many times they come bringing food and almost like a little party with the children. And it is that sense of sharing with ancestry that I'd like to reflect in this poem called All Souls Day. I'll tell you about the children when we've cleaned the dusty slumber prayer from the stones. Rest in peace, may you sleep in the Lord. But no, nothing is restful about stars or fragments of a star, flints out of the universal hip reflecting. That day we gathered by the crosses, unflowering stops that were like livid irises of skin, except they never scarred. Next to them we set our baskets, bronzed, our supper things, November sunlight, sunlit day of souls. And then we ate a cup of chickpeas and a sprig of tender spinach for the soup, an egg simmered and diced, the drizzle of an olive, green and gold, young legume, baby leaf and spawn. Is this how dying days bring days, how picnics keep alive our morning dead, with candid taste and seas amid their bones? I'll tell you about the children in a while, when they're through slurping, tittering around. The broth will soak their thumbs, leaves will gossip into chorus grass, and every blade will tremble. I'll tell you, everywhere the children will jump, unstoppable, wouldn't you? Forever full, a further morsel crumbling. We are fullness in the making. At least that's the way I see it. And one of the thrills of poetry, for me, is this constant reaching in an ebb and flow of words to that fullness, not knowing quite enough about it, but knowing viscerally that it is true, that it is there, that it exists. So I'd like to close this selection with the poem that closes the book. It's called A Way Through Words, because it is through words that we reach toward this fullness. And as I said earlier, when a thing passes, we cannot really restore it through a word unless we do it through a relationship. In other words, I feel that I create a new landscape because the word has recreated me, altered me in a way that incorporates that thing that was left behind. It's all about relationships. And what that relationship might be between that thing that's recovered in ourselves, well, that's to be discovered. And that would be quite an amazing discovery, I think. So let me close with A Way Through Words. Now and in the hour, after this, a temporary silence. Come, let the air fall gently on our laps, as if a fleece uncurling, nothing else, as if a lamb we choose out of a herd, the sacramental. After our histories of speech, harangues in song and stammer, with notices alighting on the trees, lean back, umber and ancient, on your chair, your trembling carriage. Of hopes, this is the most unbearable, yet true, our hardest moment. After the tiding up of prayers, hard at the first, amen against the last exhaling, we're asked to finger quietness, to flick the sediments of sound away as one would sweep a desert. Dry against dry, the dust lured into puffs, the mouth of nature. Strong is the tongue that tastes. Now and in the hour, one murmur and we've left this temporary silence, voices raising to tell us what things are like. By rumoring, we raise the dead. Blessed be the word at stake, the universe of stars, articulate as childbirth. Thank you very much for listening.